things too with opening up a relationship and kind of diving into polyamory is that like my friendships are so much stronger.
Yeah.
And part of that too comes from, like, as I was talking about before, that I was in a toxic monogamous relationship. Um, but like just this idea that like I have a lot of male friends, regardless of the fact that I'm bisexual and not even like one of the opposite genders, right? Like we'll ignore all
Mhm.
of that for a second. But this idea of like hanging out with the opposite gender, right? Like the
Yeah.
opposite sex never would have been allowed. Like
Mm.
I have lots of male friends, but to hang out with them one on one, like
Yeah.
absolutely not, would have never
Oh,
happened. But now I've been able to develop a lot more friendships and I've been able to talk a lot more openly about my relationships and how those things look. And it's like, I feel like all of my friendships have also developed so much,
yeah.
which has been huge. Like, just
Oh,
communication
yeah.
wise, even where I'm like, I'm willing to tell you what I need from this friendship. Whereas
Yeah.
in the past, that wasn't something I talked about. You don't talk about what you need from a relationship when it's your only relationship, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like, well, what you can give me is what you can give me. Like, what's the point of asking for more?
Yeah.
Whereas with communicating and polyamory, there's a lot more of this, like, well, these are some of my needs that aren't being met,
Yeah.
like, and having those discussions. And I started feeling comfortable doing that with my friends too, being like, I would like to talk to you once a week or whatever it may be.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it kind of helped set kind of expectations in all sorts of relationships.
Like the questions that you have, the communication strategies, it's like you could just apply this to life generally. Like that's like how I saw a lot of this was like this is less about sex and more about relationships, or like sex is a part of it, sex is just a part of it. And if you just focus on polyamory and sex, it's a bit reductive. That's not right. Like there's more going on. Man, I can't find my words, but no, that makes like a lot of sense to me that your friendships would improve.
And like, there's so many aspects to toxic monogamy, but it's more of just like this idea, first of all, that that is the norm. If you look at like music, movies, things like that, those are examples of toxic monogamy in that it's never viewed as having another option, where it's like the
Yeah.
default, and it's never talked about like, is this actually what we want, or is this just what we've always known?
Yeah.
In my relationship, it was that it's not that my husband was like, you cannot have friendships, but it never even occurred to me. It would have felt so weird or wrong
Yeah.
to like have just a guy friend over, or to like go for coffee together, things like that would have felt
Mhm.
totally wrong. And like, part of that is just had no idea. I had no kind of concept that that was something that other people even did, because in my
Mhm.
community, it just didn't happen. You
Right,
had kind of
right.
your other woman friends, and this is, of course, again, me just like gendering things, but
Yeah.
that kind of idea of where it was like, you stick with your own kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't blur those lines. Um, it also was the idea that like I didn't have other queer friends because all
Yeah.
of my friends were also my partner's friends, like were my ex-husband's friends.
Mhm.
Um, we just kind of shared the same friend group. Like maybe I
Yeah.
had a couple coworkers, like one-offs kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But like I also made a lot more friends since going kind of delving into polyamory, because I
Yeah.
went on dating apps and like met people on there that it was like, okay, we're not romantically interested, but
Mhm.
like we became very good friends and things
Yeah.
like that too. Like just having a bit more autonomy
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
made a huge difference.
I was a bit disappointed with our readings for the monogamy unit, and maybe there were some other ones and I forgot them, or like I was so tired I don't remember it. But when we explored the history of monogamy, um they talked about the Romans and the Greeks, and like there were all these, and the Egyptian, there was all these like they were saying, well, it wasn't always around, but it never seemed like okay, god, like I can't find my words today, but monogamy was really very closely associated with just like men knowing who their offspring were. Like that seemed to just be the origins, and that, and excuse me, and that like non-monogamy, the way that it was like historically practiced, just seemed really unfair to women from my perspective. It was like some of the readings were like, oh, the Romans did this and the Greeks did this, and they brought, non-monogamy is alluded to in many ways. They had several slaves and the slaves were shared. I was like, this is terrible. Like, I want to read about like people, women, because I am a woman, a cisgendered, whatever, hetero, I don't know what the hell I am. Like, maybe I'm a orientation anarchist because I don't want to put myself in an orientation bucket, but like hetero on one day, bi on a whatever. But I guess I'm a cisgendered woman. I just want to read, hear, see something about women exploring like multiple partners and like not feel like they're losing power. Like, and like all of the readings were that way. Like, that's what I found, that like when we talked about the history of monogamy and the history of non-monogamy, like um and like polyamory is not like it's not wife swapping. Like, that's another thing that bugs me. And like when I have talked about polyamory with people, first of all, wife swapping is bullshit. Like, you're swapping the husbands too. What the fuck? But then also, like, there's a lot of power in polyamory because like it's not that like I think people tend to see it as like, are the women being passed around? That's the impression that I think some people get, but it's like not this at all. It's like you're loving multiple people and women are like, it doesn't seem like gender really matters. Like, everyone's got power. Like, everybody sets their boundaries and rules, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting too because I definitely have heard it even in the modern day of people being like, um, I mean, I'll make it gendered, even though people say it about me, but like women being asked, like, well, are you fine with your husband like having
Yeah.
sex with other people? And kind of totally negating the fact that she might also be like, I mean, I'm having sex with other
I'm
people.
having it
Like,
too.
yeah, but it's this
Yeah.
idea of like, are you fine with that? Like, doesn't that kind of, belittle you or like lower your worth if he like doesn't
Yeah.
want only you? And it's like, well, fuck that. Like, if he's sleeping with somebody else, like, I'll go date my boyfriend down the street. Like,
Yeah.
there is that level of power to it. But people still frame it a lot of the time as like, but doesn't that bother you? Like,
Mm.
doesn't that make you feel less than? And it's like, well, but why are we not taking it into consideration that like I also have multiple people that are interested in
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Like, that's what like bugs me a lot is that like that framing and that like you're gonna let your wife run around. Like, she's her own person and like, she can do whatever she wants. That's actually what polyamory is. Like, and I am like, you know what, there's something to be said. I read this again, I'm gonna be super gendered. I'm gonna be super gendered, but I think that people and sex were messy sometimes. And like I remember reading, I had to read this book in high school, and it was called Not All Men Are Alike. And the reason I had to read it was for like this family studies, social studies class about like gender and well, we had to pick a relationship book. Anyways, all of this to say that in the book there was a top 10 list, and it was like top 10 things women want and top 10 things men want. And I'll never forget, number one on men's list was other men must find my partner attractive. And then like everything else was like and women, like every woman must find my man attractive was like not, I don't even think it was there, or it was very low. So like, let's just say that if you're a man and you think that way, like multiple people wanting your partner can't could that not just make her sexier and make her so powerful and then make you feel so powerful, and that like that shit's just going to get you so turned on? Like, can people not understand that like there is like that could just set like a desire off in you that like I don't want to keep them from that. I don't know, does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. And like there
Yeah.
are a lot of people that are very into that. And there's a lot of monogamous people that are into that, but don't necessarily see it as like a valid option, right? Like the whole
Yeah.
kind of like cucking or cuckolding of being
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna watch somebody like,
Yeah.
you know, do this with my wife or whatever it is. That absolutely is like a kink thing that some people
Yeah.
are into, but there's a lot of people that are into it but then don't actually, but then if it's like, well, okay, well, do you actually want to do that? It's like, oh god, no. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
letting anybody get access to my partner. And it's like, well, but
Yeah.
you're not seeing the potential here, like,
There's so much potential. Oh my
truly.
god. Oh my gosh. If you wanted you kind of talked about this, and this is I think it'd be too difficult for you to answer quickly, but if you could try like a bang bang bang, like 3 questions or bang 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 3 statements. If you wanted to explore polyamory and you have a partner, do you have any recommendations on a lead, or not a lead question, what's the word I'm looking, icebreaker? Yeah.
That's a great question. I think, hmm, I think the first thing before even asking a question would be confirming that you're with somebody that is open, like that's safe to have those conversations with.
Okay.
And that's not even to say that it's like necessarily an abusive relationship or anything like that, but
Right.
where kind of options are on the table, right? Like, so it
Yeah.
could even just be starting with like a question such as,
Yeah.
um, like, I'm just wondering if we could talk about something completely open minded, completely hypothetical,
Mhm.
and just kind of explore it as an option, right? Like, making sure you have that idea that it's like, I'm not saying I want to go out and have sex with somebody tomorrow night, but like, is this something you'd be willing to consider? I think can help just kind of like break that kind of conversation wall. A lot of the time, it honestly just takes ripping that band aid off.
Yeah.
It is not an easy conversation to bring up because monogamy is so much seen as the norm,
Yeah.
and is so much seen as the default. Going
Yeah.
away from that, it is in a lot of ways like coming out as queer because it
Yeah.
is polyamory is a queer relationship structure. It is breaking down power structures. I think it is almost inherently queer in that you're saying
Yeah.
like, hey, this, monogamy is the norm. It does
Mhm.
not work for me, and I'm not going to exist within it.
Yeah.
I am going to create a relationship in a way that I want to.
Mhm.
And it is, especially coming out to a partner about it, it is
Yeah.
a certain level of coming out. It is a
Yes.
certain amount of having to admit something, having to admit that you are going against the norm. And so, in the same way that it's hard to be like, this is how you come out as gay, it really is, it's going to be a hard conversation. That's not to say that they're not going to take it well, but it's going to be
Yeah.
nerve-wracking. Like,
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to bring up. And then it's a whole other thing having to have those conversations with your family and trying to explain it to like your parents, or having to explain it.
See,
It
like, I can't get
totally turns
there.
into a big thing.
Like, polyamory in my mind, let's say I want to explore it, it would be very private. Like, and I think to do it publicly is like, good on you. That's great. And if I saw it publicly, I know that I wouldn't care, but like I see it more as like a private endeavor. But why should it be? Like, it shouldn't have to be. It can be whatever you want it to be. Um, but like likening it to a coming out, I think is like that's really impactful because yeah, I could tell my partner something, but the thought of having to sit my mother down and be like, I'm, polyamorous or I'm queer or I'm whatever is like, oh,
Coming out, really, it can be applied to so many situations because it is basically the act of like going against people's assumptions, right?
mhm,
Like, there's this almost inherent assumption that like we don't think about women masturbating, right? Like, there's
right.
always the jokes about like men jerking off or
Yeah.
whatever.
Hmm.
But this idea of people with vulvas masturbating,
Yeah.
it's not that people assume that it doesn't happen, but it certainly isn't talked about, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like a social norm that we
Yeah.
talk about all the time. So then to
Yeah.
say, yeah, I masturbate, it becomes a revolutionary statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the same way, too, of like people assume you're monogamous. So to be
Yeah.
like, no, I have multiple partners, revolutionary statement, right? And it
Yeah.
really is just the act of telling people that you don't fit into their assumptions.
Yeah.
And they're hard conversations to have. It can be in the form of so many different things, but
Yeah.
there is that certain level of like kind of admitting
Yeah.
that you aren't meeting the kind of expectations people had for you.
God, it's huge. It's such like a like different way to look at it. That like that's a big hurdle to jump. Before I go into, I want to like just share a story and I don't even know if it really means anything, but anyways, I'll just share it. This is like years ago that I was like talking to a girlfriend of mine, and she was saying that she was somewhere hanging out with her husband, and they were with another couple, and I can't remember under what circumstances they were with this other couple. They were friends. They knew them not very well, but they were hanging out at this other couple's place, and then it becomes apparent that that couple are swinger. That they said swingers. So like now that I have a broader definition, I don't actually know if they were really swingers or if they were just polyamorous people or they had an open relationship, and that she told that story. Oh, we realized that they swung and we got out of there as fast as we could. And it's like, what are these people going to do to you exactly? Like, you can't sit and have a conversation with them. Like, you think they're going to attack? Like, there's such a sexual deviant because you what I like you don't want to be monogamous, or perhaps you struggle with monogamy, I don't know, or you're both okay exploring something else. Like, as far as sex
Yeah,
is concerned with consent, it's like I don't think I care so much, you know.
totally. And that's the thing too, that it's like, were you afraid that they were going to like come on to you in a way that wasn't consensual? Like,
Yeah.
for the most
Yeah.
part, it's a conversation that happens. Like,
Yeah.
swinging aside, if somebody would just start kissing you without consent, problem. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a couple and you're a couple. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like not a polyamorous issue or like a
Yeah.
non-monogamy issue. Like, if that's
Yeah.
what you're concerned about, that's a whole different issue, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it really is just this stereotype totally that you're talking about, that it's like this
Yeah.
hypersexualized, like
Mhm.
um, sexual deviance kind of a
Yeah.
thing that is just so inaccurate most of the
It's
time.
so yeah. If anything, you guys are talking a lot. Less sex, more
A
talk.
lot.
And I'm like, maybe I'm not polyamorous because there's
You just want more sex.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I was gonna ask you if you because I've never really seen representations of polyamory in media. Now I'm seeing articles and things like that. But monogamy is the norm. I don't like, you're right, movies, TV, whatever, that's all you see. It's even like our tax dollars go into paying teachers to tell us that like monogamy is the right way and marriage is the right way to go. Have you seen any accurate representations of polyamory in media? Like any movies or something that you can recommend?
I haven't seen a whole lot. One that I did like, and I have not actually watched it again since like exploring polyamory, but I watched, oh god, now I gotta remember what it's called. Like Sense 8. Does that seem like a real
Oh,
thing?
isn't
It was
that
a
like,
Netflix show, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Was it German? No, it was
I
English.
know that there were different people in the show from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
I watched it a few years ago now, but basically the premise is that there's these 8 people in the world who can kind of like telepathically connect
Yes.
and can
Yeah.
almost like not not teleport, but almost like spiritually teleport to each other in a
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
But it does turn into, because they can do that, because they can get into each other's brains, they're able to have sex, fall in love with each other. And so, like, if you want some good, steamy orgy sex scenes,
Oh, okay.
it's very good.
I was gonna
Like I said, I
say,
haven't
yeah,
watched it recently, so this is not me saying like it has the polyamorous like stamp of approval,
yeah,
but like also very diverse characters, like trans, queer, like great
very cool.
characters.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it was directed by the trans woman who directed The Matrix.
Oh, one of the Wachowski sisters?
I think so. And
Oh,
now that
okay.
could be completely inaccurate. You're maybe going to get like a billion comments being like, he has no idea what the
How
fuck they're
dare you?
talking about. That's possible. But I do recommend that show. I did greatly enjoy it. And I
Yeah.
do remember, it was one of my grade 8 students when I was teaching in Thailand who
Oh,
recommended
wow.
it to me. And I
Yeah.
was like, sure, I'll watch it. And so I would watch it in the staff room while I'm like cutting out stuff or marking as a teacher. And I would have to minimize my screen and just have my headphones on. But it was like so
Ooh,
sexy. I could
now
feel
we're talking.
myself like blushing as I'm trying to just focus. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Well, I was gonna ask what your favorite sex scene in a movie is. Is that's it? Is that what you would? That's one of the big ones?
I don't know if there's any that, like, there were some good ones in there. I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite, but I do know one that Okay, I mean, the Titanic sex scene, that's just iconic.
Yo, big one.
Like, the
Yeah.
"Take Me to the Stars," whatever, iconic.
The
But I
stars.
was gonna
Yeah.
say that the first one I remember, and where it, like, actually has stuck with me, because I think it was a bit of, like, a sexual awakening,
Yeah.
was in the movie The Illusionist. I don't
Okay.
know if you've seen it. It's like a magic-y one. I wanna say it was Keira Knightley, but that could also be wrong. I'm just
Is
giving
it
more
Edward
fuel
Nor
to the
I
comments
know.
here.
I was gonna be like, "What is this?" Was it Edward Norton and Christian Bale? Or is that The Prestige? I feel like two magic movies came out at the same time, but anyways, you go
Yeah,
on.
that's true.
Okay. Are you
But
looking it up?
I am looking it up. I absolutely am.
While you're
Edward
looking it up.
Norton. Oh,
Oh, okay.
Jessica Biel as
Jessica
Jessica
Biel.
Biel.
Okay.
Okay, even hotter. Um, but I just remember in this sex scene, it was like very tasteful or whatever, but a lot of like the dim glowing light and then like panning over just limbs and like
Yeah.
limbs touching other limbs
Yeah.
and being like, I don't even, I honestly don't think I knew how sex worked, but I remember being like,
Wow.
whoa, like to be that close to another
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
So that's one that kind of stuck with me. I should watch that
Yeah.
movie again to see if I
You
still
should
would like
watch it
it.
again.
But
You know what's so funny? When I ask people this, I was one of my closest girlfriends years ago. I was in a car accident. I was in bed. I was like in recovery for like 3 months, and she came over and she brought over like a sexy movie, and she was like, "This movie is hot stuff, and there's a scene in here that's gonna blow your mind." And all I was doing was lying in bed watching movies all day. I was like, "Put it on, let's go." And then we watch. She's like, "It's coming! Like the big scene is coming!" And it's with Andy Garcia and Andy. I can't even remember the name of the movie. And she like slaps him and just shaking him, and then they like kiss, and then they like fade slowly like into the background. And I was like, and then it goes to the next scene, and I'm like, that's it? Like that? She was like, no, they do it against the wall. They like roll on the ground. Like I was like, that's all you. You did that. Like, I was like, when did you watch this? And she was like, I don't know. I was like in grade 5. Like, it was like the sexiest thing she'd ever seen. Not that that doesn't make it still sexy. It's just that like she had built a whole fantasy around it. Then you go back and watch it, and you're like, oh, like that was that. Oh, okay, but
mhm.
whatever. Anyways, but okay, I wanted to ask you something too, because people ask me this all the time, and then I'll wrap it up. Where do you meet people? Like, is that a good question? Because people want to know if you're polyamorous, you're having sex or dating multiple people. Where the hell do you meet these people? And I think it's because they really want to know where to find them.
I use a lot of dating apps.
Yeah.
And I mean, I specifically use ones that have good queer, like gender options. I don't use ones that
Okay.
make me choose male or female.
Okay.
So the ones I use are Her
It's an app?
and yep, Her is basically kind of for all intents and purposes, it's for not cis men. So there are some
Oh,
like trans men
okay.
on there. There's a lot of non-binary folks. There's lots of trans women, and then there's lots of cis women, but
Yeah.
basically no like cis men,
Mhm.
which personally I think is delightful.
Yeah.
I also use, I never know how to pronounce it. Tammy,
How do you
T
spell
A
it?
I M I,
Okay.
and that's just another queer dating app.
Okay.
And then I also use Field, which is one that is specifically for non monogamous relationships. And that one is spelled FEELD. So it's kind of like playing the field, but also feelings. See, play on words.
Oh,
But
gotcha.
that one is specifically for non monogamous relationships.
Okay.
Um, and that's where I've met a good amount of people.
Mhm.
On that one. And it also is good. There's a lot of the times where couples will go on there together,
Yeah.
because it's a little bit more of like there's no pressure to be like I am one person. You can
Mm.
be like, hey, we're looking for a threesome, or like
Mhm.
we're looking to have fun with another couple. Those
Huh.
kinds of things are on there as well. So it kind of like opens up those options for
Hmm.
kind of connecting with people that way as well.
Hey, I have not heard of any of these.
There you go.
Wow. Here, I thought I was a sex positive person. I don't like I think
To be
that
fair,
like
I've never downloaded Tinder. I've never downloaded like Hinge or Bumble. So like,
yeah.
you know,
Whatever, man. I was gonna say, I think people find polyamory a bit intimidating. Like, I don't even know, like, I'm not cool enough to get it. Like, maybe I'm not like, I'm old and uncool, but that's like so silly. Maybe that's just me where it's like, no, I think anybody can want to like love someone, but I do feel like people get intimidated by it. Not threatened, intimidated. Like they don't think they're good enough for it or something, you know?
It totally is a very different mindset change. I
Mhm.
personally love it and like love being on apps. There's way less pressure of like I've been with people in the past where like even just in the past year where they for the most part they are monogamous,
Yeah.
but where they've been like, well, now that we're talking, I've deleted all my apps. And I'm like, well, why? Like,
Mhm.
I'm still on the apps. I'm still meeting other people. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to just drop everything. But then this idea that it's like, oh, this didn't work out. Now I'll download all the apps again and I'll start over.
Yeah.
Um, so it has been nice too, even in just being like, there's a lot less pressure in a sense. That doesn't mean that the relationships matter less, but there's less of this like, is this one going to work out forever, or am I
Yeah.
going to suddenly be 40 and then it ends, right? It's like
Yeah.
I'm going to keep building connections as I see
Yeah.
fit, and there's no like waste of time in a sense. Like a lot of the time there's that feeling of like, well, I was with them for like 17 years, like what a waste of 17 years when it ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you have other connections at the same time, you see it more as like, I enjoyed 17 years with that person.
Yeah.
Like it's less of like, oh my god, I have to start over. So
Mhm.
it is nice to have that freedom in that sense as well.
You know what? There was something I wanted to bring up and now I remember, before I go. Um, you hear so much about sexuality like being on a spectrum, and I believe that it is. Um, and monogamy is the thing that you're taught is the only way to be. But like I think that monogamy is also on a spectrum. Like it must be on a spectrum in the way that I think that for some people, like I was saying, I think for some people it's very easy for them. Um and I think for some people like myself, like it's hard. Like I'm committed, but I don't believe in cheating, but like it's something that I don't think comes inherently very naturally to me. And I wonder why we don't talk about monogamy being on a spectrum. It must, right? And like how many people are falling into this like same category where they're like this is a tough struggle for me, and how many people are like I have no problem. And then how many people are like in the middle where they're like it's tough, but like I make it work. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And there are terms like I know some folks use the term monogamish, where
Yeah,
it's
and
like
Savage, right?
where it's
Yeah.
kind of like kind of monogamous. And so there's these different like experiences, and also the fluidity of relationships. Like there will
Yeah.
be times where like it might be where you're like, I'm totally content in a monogamous relationship. And then
Right.
there might be other times where you're like, hey, I'm looking for a little more. Maybe I want to connect with somebody else, but maybe that relationship ends and you're not like, whoa, I need a replacement. But it's like, no, I can like do the just me and you thing again. Like, so there is
Yeah.
that fluidity in relationships, but we don't talk about it because we don't
Yeah.
normalize non-monogamy.
This makes me think about that. Look, see how I keep talking, and I'm going to wrap it up. But like, this makes me to think about the fantasy readings that we did. This is also a big unit that had a lot of impact on me. And I remember reading one of the studies on fantasies was that like the way fantasies were viewed, sexual fantasies, has like changed over time. And there was a time that it was viewed as such that if you had sexual fantasies and you were married and you were in a relationship, that was a sign of like that was an abnormality. That meant that you were unsatisfied and unhappy. And then the pendulum swung, and now sexual fantasies are viewed as very healthy. In fact, they're viewed so healthy that if you don't have them, that's a bit of a cause for concern. That like so like I'm trying to connect the dots here. Like fantasizing at one point was seen as like this deviant kind of behavior, and then now it's seen as like no, that's a healthy part of being a person. Whereas like monogamy at some point like the opposite. Like there was a time when it wasn't seen as a deviation at all, like quite the opposite. Like that was actually unusual, and like now anything but monogamy is such a it's such a deviation that like it's entirely unfair. Like, I just think that human beings are complicated and messy, and like, not messy, is that the right word? We're complicated. Like, why is it so simple? It's just like that things can change is what I guess I'm trying to
Totally.
say, you know?
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I feel like I could probably write a paper on it, but I think a lot of it has to do with capitalism as well. And just this
Yeah.
idea that it's a lot easier to profit off of people if they don't have that same level of autonomy. And, like,
Right.
if you're buying the, like, his and hers mugs, and if you're buying,
Yeah.
like, the typical wedding dress and you're applying to, like, the government to be legally married, right? It turns into this whole thing of keeping people in certain structures. And
Yeah.
like, you can't legally marry more than one person. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about polygamy, obviously, but just like the actual act of being like, I am married to more than one person, and to get those legal benefits or things like that isn't an option. So it does put these limits on people.
I think okay, I think that I may ask you if you don't mind to clarify. I know the difference, but clarify polyamory and polygamy because a lot of people connect the two. Um a lot of people like yeah, they connect the two. Explain the difference. Explain the difference if you don't mind.
Yeah, totally. So polygamy, for the most part, there is a certain level of association with sexism, with it being kind of
Yes.
anti-feminist, and
Yes.
that would be, for the most part, it would be a man who has multiple wives, and this is
Right.
a lot of the time in situations and in cultures too, where women are seen kind of as a
Mhm.
belonging, kind of
Yeah.
as something that, like, a possession,
Yeah.
and so then you get more wives, and then you kind of have more help around the house, you have more people who can bear children for you, that kind of an idea.
Mhm.
Polyamory has that suffix of amory, meaning love,
Yeah.
just as multiple loves. So it is really just this recognition that people have the capacity to, or the desire to, or are currently practicing being romantically in love with multiple
Right.
people.
Right.
And so it just kind of has that freedom in that sense of just romantically being in love with multiple people.
Do you believe that multiple people should be able to marry multiple people?
I mean, I'm a little bit of like a anarchist in general, and I'm like, well, what
Yeah.
is the purpose of marriage?
Yeah.
Um, as somebody
Yeah.
who has gotten married in the past, and I'm like, well, this did nothing for me.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also like, I got married for religious reasons. I'm no longer religious, and so I'm
Mhm.
kind of like, well, why am I married?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I have a partner in the States who we have talked about getting married just to make their immigration process
To get
easier.
him
Like,
here. Yeah.
being in love, whatever, like, obviously it's not doing it for like
Mhm.
horrible purposes, it's still
Mhm.
in love.
Mhm.
But just this idea of like, well, may as well use it to my benefit.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if I would I don't know. I think it would be nice to have the option to marry
Yeah.
multiple people.
Yeah.
Even just to, like, I'm only allowed to have one person on my, like, benefits plan for work,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yeah.
you get one spouse, or like bereavement leave, things like that.
Yeah.
Like, right now, if my husband died, because we're still legally married,
Yeah.
um, I would get bereavement leave. If one of my other partners would die, they're not considered family. They're not considered a
Yeah, I
spouse.
know. Yeah.
And so it's just that idea where it's like, it would potentially be nice to have that kind of level of acknowledgement in society,
Mhm.
I guess,
Yeah.
but recognizing that it really, for me, would only be for this recognition of society, not because it's something I need.
I know. Yeah, I feel that. As somebody who's partnered and currently is not married, nor do I ever want to be. And I wrote that in my reflection paper too, that this unit in this presentation helped me because I never felt like I fit somewhere properly. Like I just the government institutionalized get two people together like I'm monogamous and I'm committed and but why the hell do I need to do that? It never even occurred to me to do that. And that like my god, people really want you to do that. Like they're pushing you so hard to do it and it's like I have everything I need without it. Anyways, I don't want to turn this into a but yeah, that makes sense to me. That like if you are a relationship anarchist, that like sure, I guess like maybe that would be nice I get to have multiple like spouses, but
And I found it interesting too. Like, there is this inherent idea of hierarchy when people are married.
yeah.
Like, I would start talking to people on apps, and we would like be connecting, and they would know I'm polyamorous, whatever, like that would be totally fine. And then they, one person in particular went on my Instagram and was like, "You're married." And I'm like, "Yeah, I told you I have multiple partners. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about this." And they're like, "Well, you didn't say that you were married. Like, that's
Yeah.
totally different." And I'm like, "It's really not though. Like,
Yeah.
I don't live with him. I like, but there is this idea that it's like, well, you did a full ceremony. You're like, in the eyes of the government, you're a unit." And I'm like, "I know, but like, it's
Mm.
just a view. It's not really accurate, but it is
Yeah.
interesting for sure."
I hate it.
I hate it too.
I hate it. Oh my god. I mean, I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna stop this now. But anyways, but I want to tell you how much I hate it. Anyways, thank you for joining, B. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I hope you had fun.
Yeah, it
Um,
was great.
I hope I didn't hammer you with too many questions, but thanks so much. And thank you everybody for watching and listening. Bye.